So and probably as well just call the dude that I'm supposed to play it. Okay, I'm ready. That's what I'm gonna send it to him. And just wait until he accepts. So after he accepts, we can all just go and play and such. Obviously, waiting in vain is kinda pointless, but can't do much. I couldn't specify the hours and stuff, so it's partially my fault, partly his fault, whatever. Don't care. Oh, okay, he needs to accept me risk and it's really important to keep in mind that for all of the services you need some kind of access. So for example on Discord you need to be friends with someone to call him. On Steam you have to be friends with someone to spectate and etc, etc. Like all of this similar stuff. Don't know how it's gonna be in game, but okay, accepts. I also have to do one more thing, and this will be it. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. How you doing?
Okay, great. I'm doing fine. I hope you too. So for starters, obviously my English is not perfect. So if you don't understand something or want me to repeat something, then just tell me, and I will try to explain it. Or
what other language do you speak, Advin?
I speak Polish, so I guess
sorry.
it will not work out.
I speak 3 languages and none of them are Polish. Damn.
Yeah.
Makes me sad.
Oh, well, it shouldn't. Like, Polish is one of these really strange languages. Like, only Polish people and people really interested in the language learns it, because it's useless for most of parts of the world, so... Okay, so, I will send a spectate request in the game. So I...
Is it working?
It's loading, so I'll still a second until it appears on my screen. So for the Steam, it has something around 10 seconds of delay. And what are we gonna do? Like on the ladder play? Because I suppose we're gonna go ladder, unless you wanna go on the take-twos, but I doubt it. Like the take-twos are really strange in this game, so ladder is probably way better to practice. So at the beginning of like every turn and every move, you just tell me what would you want to do and how would you want to like attack and trade things and do some stuff, and then I will just tell you if it's fine, good, bad, or whatever, like what play needs to be made. And that's because there is a delay. So during this delay you can simply just tell me what would you do, like rethink the entire turn, and then I will have my time to correct this. But first thing first, like these are like the similar question that I have to ask to every people. What is your current goal? Like, what do you want to achieve from the game, and what do you want to learn?
I'm trying to move into tournaments.
Okay.
Did you not hear me? I'm trying to move into tournaments.
Yeah, I heard you. I hear you fine. I mean, I can also make your voice a little louder, but other than that, it's fine.
Like I signed up for the, I think it's the Shadow Nexus monthly, but there was a message today that it might be cancelled. So more time to practice, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. And also for tournaments, well, I suppose you're living in Europe, so we don't have access to YCGs and all of the Asian tournaments, and that's sad because the scene there is really huge, while in Europe and America it's not so big. I mean, we had NGA, but that's like the only big tournament that was recently. Okay, so just getting into tournaments. So did you play in any tournaments before, or you just played ladder, and then are just trying to transition to tournaments?
For Shadowverse specifically, ladder, but I've played in tournaments for other games.
Okay, that sounds good. But did you play any other card games, or you play just tournaments in other games?
Pokemon specifically, the card game and the video game, and Smash Brothers as well.
Okay, sounds fine. And did you play? Okay, did you play maybe in Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering? Any of this, or not?
Not Magic the Gathering, not Hearthstone. I did play Hearthstone, but I grew very weary of it very fast. And as for physical card games, not Magic the Gathering, I played Pokemon, and when it was still a thing, Legend of the Five Rings, before that game died miserably.
Okay, yeah, I know it. Like, I know some people who also played it. But because your history, like background with the card games and such, makes it easier to make some comparisons and explain some examples in the game. For the starters, so right now for the tournaments, you need a specific mindset, but we'll get to this later on, because there is like a book that I recommend to everyone, and like I'm surprised that a lot of people, like most of them, most of the trainees that I had session with had no idea that it existed. Did you ever read Play to Win on their Syrian webpage?
No, I have not read it.
Okay.
But I don't think mindset is going to be much of a problem.
Okay.
I have been through Smash Brothers competitive, and that is probably the most salty thing I've ever seen. So don't worry about mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, but it's still a really good thing. So I will send you a link later on. Because this thing, even if you were in the competitive Smash, then for the card games, it's gonna be like the similar thing and such. But of course, there might be some aspect that maybe you lack or that you can improve. Like there's always room to improve in any aspect of any game, so that's gonna be fine. For the deck lists, because I'd like to, it would let me know what decks are you playing right now.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can.
It might take 10 seconds, but I've got quite a few decks. I have multiple versions of different decks, and one of my main problems is I don't know what to bring, because I don't know what's good in tournaments. Because ladder is one thing, tournaments is something completely different. And I don't know what people tech, I don't know what's popular, I don't know anything, I'm going in completely blind. So I'd like to have some sort of insight as to what the meta is in the tournament at the moment.
Okay, so recently?
If there is one.
Huh? Sure. But it's probably faster if you probably can just send me a deck code or whatever. But right now, as for deck list, if you are going to a tournament, well, it's really hard because unless you are in a community of players or you are in a team which have good deck builder, because there is people think, and it's a lie, like that every good player is a good deck builder. And it's not true at all. Like, to be a good deck builder, you have to be excellent player, and every good deck builder will be a good player, while not every good player will be a good deck builder, because those are like two different things. So, unless you're in a community or in a team with a good deck builder, then it's gonna be really hard to create decks on your own. So, the best thing to do, like right now, for the beginning, you can just copy decks or copy setups from the similar tournaments, and obviously the best tournaments to copy from would be the Asian ones, because the player base and the competition right there is really fierce, and it's not, it's not as bad as in Europe, in America, because, well, Europe, America, we have our own tournaments, but it's not the same. It's the same, I don't know how it was in Smash, but you are probably familiar with the League of Legends or any other game where Korean or any country, like from the Asia, dominates the scene. Yeah, well, Europe and America is behind. So the same goes with the Shadowverse. So on the Begum side, you probably know it. And I will also send you a link, like to the most recent one. There's a lot of decklists, and these are the decklists from the current tournaments. So obviously the format there is different, but these lists are gonna be good. They are working for people, so obviously they are checked out and they are well refined. You can make some tech choices between them, so if there's like single card or two cards, that you can swap them. But as a whole, these decks should be refined and beat ladder or tournaments. They are like cookie cutter builds, so you can just use them and be fine, like win a lot of games. The other thing is there was a Rage finals recently, but as for the Rage finals, this was a really big tournament, and also the format was different because there was 3-deck format. But there is it's also a good guideline, so feel free to check the decks from there.
Yeah, I've had a look through the decks already, and I've looked through the cards and all that business. But I know, but the meta like constantly changes and different things happen, and I wanted to see if you had any insight as to how it's developing, moving forward. That is.
Okay, so right now it's really hard to judge. That's because there is only like 1 week before we have next expansion, and then we'll have the metagame with the next expansion for entire 3 months. So this moment is probably one of the worst to just see for the gaming future, because we don't know all of the cards from the new expansion yet, and this cannot be explained.
Shout out to one of the coolest coaches on the Sky University roster.
Wait a second.
You can give for all you've done. Thank you so much.
Jeez, I just got like donate and this loud text to speech just appeared. I forgot to turn it off. But well, whatever.
No problem.
Yeah. Anyway, just as for the metagame, like I just said, it's really hard to predict what's gonna be good, and you can also see like I don't know for how much, like how long are you playing Shadowverse? When did you start?
Let me check Steam.
I mean, the month is not important. What expansion did you join? That's probably easier.
I joined late Tempest of the Gods.
Okay, so you were present at the beginning of the Wonderland Dreams, so you could probably notice that the beginning of the Wonderland Dreams, the first month, the Abyss deck was like the meta deck, the Tier 1 deck that was hated by everyone, and then while the meta progressed of the course of the 2 weeks, people started playing neutral blood with Phantom cards, then they went to Hybrid Phantom and Abyss, and then eventually deck got a little nerfed end of the month, but obviously throughout the entire month the meta was shapeshifting. And the same went after the nerfs in July, so the meta was different. And right now, after nerfs to the current cards, we have Neutral Haven on the top. And the same goes for Dimension Shift for tournaments. So the current metagame for this week, we can probably expect a lot of Neutral Havens, because people will just copy-paste deck from the internet. And it's a common thing to do. So a lot of Neutral Havens, a lot of Dimension Shift rune, because it's not a great deck for ladder, it's a good deck for tournaments, but people will still copy it without understanding how to play the deck and what to do. So versus Dimension Shift you can expect a lot of free wins. As for the mid-range Shadow, it's also a really good choice, it's a really staple deck. Other thing is, people are also farming chests. So for the purpose of chest farming, they will go and play some things like Sword. So Ambush Sword, Neutral Sword, these are the really fast and efficient decks, and if you are going first with Sword, then the chances are that you're gonna just win from the spawn onwards. Like, doesn't matter what your opponent is playing, what cards he's gonna get, Sword going first have really good advantage over all of the other decks at the moment. So that's probably the things that you can expect. Obviously, there will be some crazy people who will play exceptional decks, so Aegis Haven, Neptis Shadow, just stuff like that. That's not conventional, but they just like it. But the more games you play, the more standardized the meta is gonna be. So, for example, if you play 10 games, you can make 10 different decks. But if you play 100 games, then most of them are probably gonna be Neutral Storm, Haven, and Midrange Shadow. So that's like an assumption, but that's how the meta is currently shaping. Obviously, it's not gonna matter after 1 week when the expansion release. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, I figured as much. I was kind of hoping maybe to get some sort of insight for the tournament that's going to be would have been happening on Friday. I don't know if it's going to happen anymore, so I could have maybe prepared myself a little bit. But since it might not be happening, it doesn't really matter too much. Especially since, like you said, the expansion is going to roll over. Anything you're excited about for the expansion?
Not yet. To be honest, I only saw a couple of cards, and I just plan to review when we see all of them. Because if you start judging cards, you will go by them with only the knowledge of the cards that are already released. And because we still don't know how like cards gonna turn out, so if you don't know entirety of the card base, then the decisions or your judgment might be biased. For example, let's assume Wonderland Dreams. What would happen if you saw like entire spoiler, all of the cards from the Wonderland Dreams, but you wouldn't see Alice, for example, until the last day? Then you would, like people would say that stuff, that neutral is fine, but they lack something, blah 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 blah, and then the Alice is released, and then they just see new scope, like they can arrange things differently, they can judge the cards and archetypes differently. So I think it's the best, just wait until the entire list of the card is released, and then just judge and theory craft decks.
Okay. If that's the way you do things, fair enough.
Yeah, like there is a lot of different approaches for it.
Speculation. I think speculation is a lot of fun. Even if you're not trying to be competitive, just playing around with the cards and the ideas.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot more about the game just through thinking about it than you do playing it. Obviously, you learn a lot more by playing it, but there's some things that are like those wow moments where it's like, how do I put it? Someone, for example, realizes, holy shit, you can get Spawn of the Abyss out on turn 6 with Baphomet.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But anyways, moving on.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fine, and well, different people will do things differently. For me, it's more like routine. I've been playing card games for like 8-9 years, something like that at the moment, and the first I started with Magic the Gathering, and obviously with every set, with Magic Gathering, I was really excited, like, oh, new cards, new cards, new cards, new cards. But over the course of the years, the excitement is simply going down for me. It went down for me, so right now I'm just looking at it. Okay, I will just wait for the spoiler and then see. Like, it's not the same anymore.
It's not the same anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
Sounds like something out of a movie. I'm just having fun. No, I'm just teasing. It's fine.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
I don't take things very seriously.
Sure, that's fine. Like, I still prefer to have a conversation instead, because on the one session the trainee was silent, like, for entire time, had no questions, he didn't ask questions, he didn't talk and all, and this was like awkward silence all of the time. And I think spending time with talking, like, that's the best way to do it efficiently, so we can get answer questions and learn something. So for the questions that I mentioned before, do you have any of them in mind right now?
Well, I've already dealt with one of them, which was the tournament scene. That was probably the main question that I had. The second question probably is, in terms of specific tech choices, what cards have you seen that keep cropping up? Like, we had Tina, for example, show up all over the place as a tech choice during Wonderland Dreams release. Is there anything that you've seen that kind of fits that role that I should be aware of?
Currently, some people are attacking Deathly Tyrant in their Shadowcraft decks, and it's also the thing that appeared just recently. Like, last month, people were still sticking to Ektar, but this month, Ektar got nerfed. So a lot of Shadows started attacking Deathly Tyrant, and no one can say if it's an optimal thing to do, if it's suboptimal, if it's working or not, but that's this element of surprise. That's something that can just kill you out of nowhere, and sometimes you have to be aware of it. And as for the tech cards, this thing isn't really common in Shadowverse. I mean, some decks will still use some different techs, so they will, instead of taking cards, they will just play one-offs that are really strange. So some Dimension Shifts will play Chimeras, some Dragons will play Prince of Darkness, but I wouldn't say there is a lot of good tech cards at the moment. Like, Tina was the perfect example, because she was a sleeper and she wasn't used in the decks before the Wonderland Dreams. So Wonderland Dreams released a lot of neutrals, so Tina was the obvious choice. But a lot of cards in Shadowverse are really narrow. So the range of answers, like the range of cards that can answer, is really limited. So unless specific deck is shaping metagame, like the neutral deck were doing so in the past, I don't think we'll see more tech cards. Like, of course, you can say that text for neutrals, text for one archetype existed in the past. So if you were playing in Tempest of the Gods, I believe the Banish, Lightning Blast, was still a thing before nerf. So it had the enhanced effect, but I'm not sure when the nerf was released. But it was a really good tech versus Shadow, for example. So you would just banish his stuff, and the Catacomb Prince and Skeletons, they were all get banished. But for the other cards, it's really hard to say what the people are doing with their singletons. Most of the decks just prefer to be consistent, so they will play 3 of every card and be fine with it. But one of these examples where card can still be a one-off and just be useful is Blood Hungry Matriarch. And Control Blood will sometimes play Blood Hungry Matriarch in their deck, and versus aggro, it's perfect. It just killed the entire board of aggro. Versus controls, it's not good, but versus controls you have other cards that you can take advantage of. So it's not taking too much of a spot in your deck, and it's still a fine card to have.
Alright, pretty good. I think that answered my question pretty well.
I mean, maybe some more things will come in mind, but right now I just cannot think about anything that would just take the meta in such a way. Like Deathly Tyrant is probably an exception, but that's because it's unexpected damage and also because Hector works differently. Like with the previous iteration of Hector, you just wanted to have as many shadows as possible and then produce as many zombies as possible. But right now, it will not only it will take max of 8 shadows, but also sometimes you will just use Hector for the damage and not use his necromancy effect. Then just wait and kill your opponent with Deathly Tyrant. Some stalemate matches can be won just like this.
Sorry about that. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, the other things right now, so you said you want to transition to the tournaments. So what are your plan for ladder right now? Because I doubt, I mean, until you grind hardcore for the next week, it's gonna be really hard for you to reach Grandmaster. It's still like 7,000 points, 7.5.
Yeah, I don't care about Grandmaster. I've reached 2,500 playing meme decks. Mostly just trying to do daily wins and going for chest. The 2,500 just kind of happened. I'm waiting for next month to make the push to Grandmaster.
Okay. Yeah, next month sounds cool. Well, also, starting next month, you will have 3 months to either go 10,000 in 1 month or 25 combined in 3 months, so there is a lot of room.
Doesn't it reset every month, though?
Grandmaster rankings are taken differently. So if you got Grandmaster, for example, like a lot of people did in July, then in August and September you didn't have to grind for Grandmaster. Like you were 0 points, but still Grandmaster instead of Master. That's what happened after the reset. And as for the cumulative points, it goes like this. Because you need 10,000 Master score in order to get series for the Grandmaster. But for the cumulative thing, if you were like 8,000 into the September, then, for example, 8,000 in the next month. Okay, September wasn't a good idea. Like October is the month that it's starting, so 8,000 in October, then 8,000 in November, it's 16,000. Then in December, if you go into 9,000, then you would get the series, because then it would give you the combined 25,000. So it's still making a thing for people who just do a lot of points, but they weren't able to do 10,000.
In 1 month.
Yeah, in 1 month. But getting 10,000 in 1 month is probably easier than getting 25 on the course of 3 months, because it requires a lot of more time, a lot of grind and such, and not everyone have the time, and not everyone have so much free time to grind, because as you probably noticed, in this game, skill and master points are not equivalent to each other, so not always the person who have more points will be the better player and such. I mean, it applies to most of the rankings in card games like this. In this one particularly, you just have to grind and grind and grind, so the more you play, the more score you will have, eventually, on the long run. But that's probably it when it comes to for the ladder.
I definitely noticed that the reaching master was much more annoying than it was challenging. And even once in master rank, I'm playing against people who are complete potatoes and people who are rather good. At least in certain ranks lower down, you had some sort of consistency.
Huh?
But yeah, the Grandmaster's not that important to me at the moment. I don't really care too much. At the end of the day, it's just a rank. It doesn't really mean much.
I mean,
It's just a fancy gem on my account.
Yeah, that's true. But the good thing about it's like 10 free packs. So that's the only good thing. But if you reach the Grandmaster in the next month, then it's probably gonna be 10 packs from the expansion that's not released yet. If you reach the Grandmaster like in the July, August, September, then you're getting 10 Wonderland Dreams packs. So it's not a lot. It's still like 1,000 gold, but it's still just a nice thing to have. And obviously the sleeves. Some people really do like to present them sleeves because they're animated. That's probably the only animated skin in the game, though. I didn't see any other.
As far as I'm aware, it is.
Okay. So yeah. As for ladder, so you said you were playing with meme decks. But if you want to focus on tournament, unless you play with your friends, so or with other players, or if you have a team with your teammates, then ladder is still the only room where you can just prepare for tournaments. So you have to play serious deck on the ladder, and that will just give you the grasp of the deck and how to pilot it, how to make trades, what turns are important. And the other thing is to just know the archetypes of your opponent, because unless you are joining a super competitive tournament, the chances are the metagame is still gonna consist of a lot of ladder decks that people will just bring with them. So they will be just prepared by playing ladder.
Alright. That's not to say I've only been playing meme decks on ladder. I have been practicing with my normal decks on ladder.
Okay.
But the only real problem is that playing ladder is like kind of, at least for practicing, is kind of like flipping the dice, rolling the dice, because you don't know what you're going to be going up against. You could be going against like Super Grandmaster who's won millions of tournaments, or you can play some average Joe playing his random, I don't know, Rose Queen deck.
Yeah, that's totally true. But the other thing is, if you meet these random decks and random decks, then it's still gonna work fine for you in the tournaments, because it's gonna be hard to take you by surprise. So in a lot of tournaments, not every tournament is won by the most consistent player or the player with the best decks. Sometimes, and especially with new meta. So that's what's gonna happen in the tournaments that will be in the first 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 1 month, but not more, because every month we have nerf and buff cycle, so every month they change some cards. Like this was the thing for the past 3 months, and I expect they probably gonna continue this. It's healthy for the metagame. So 2 to 3 weeks, it's all it gonna takes for metagames to shape up. And some tournaments, and I predict it's gonna be it because history repeats itself, are gonna be won by people who just take out everyone else by surprise. They just go with their really unexpected decks. They will have some unexpected cards, unexpected decks. So unless you met something like this on ladder, you just wouldn't know what's gonna happen and what's gonna be with his deck. So obviously, if you meet something like this on ladder, when you meet the similar deck on the tournament, then at least you will be prepared and you will know some steps that you have to take in order to win.
Fair enough. Sounds good.
Okay. So as for the current ladder, what were you playing right now besides the meme decks? What decks were you testing? As for the classes,
I've been playing. My main concern is like which decks do I've chosen the classes, but I don't know about the deck specifically. I'm bringing Haven, Sword, and Shadow, but Haven I'm a little bit iffy on because I'm someone who just played nothing but Aegis all the way up to Masters, as well as Seraph. But and I know neutral's all the rage now. It's all line is OP, so on and so forth. But how do I say? Aegis is kind of my comfort zone, if that makes any sense, and I kind of want to bring Aegis. But I've been playing against some other people who are really, really good, and Aegis has just been getting completely destroyed. So I'm not sure whether neutral is really worth taking the risk on, because I basically played almost no neutral. I don't know how to play it very well. And as for Shadow, it's a case of either Nephthys or mid-range, and I know mid-range is coming back now, and but again, it's that kind of case where I'm a very much like I like to play control decks, right? So I play my Nephthys, I play my Aegis, I play all these kind of things. But again, mid range is better than Nephthys, so it's a case of do I go with the meta or do I go with my comfort zone? And Sword is just neutral mid range, and that's very straightforward. That's no question.
Yeah, Sword is really good. So let me ask again, when is that tournament? Like the first one you are preparing right now?
It was supposed to be for Friday, but I don't know what's happening. Apparently, the organizer won't be around, and the person's trying to get someone else, but I'm not entirely too sure.
Okay.
I'll check the Discord if there's been any update.
Okay, so as for things, like I will try to explain like the process. So you said you prefer control decks, like you played a lot of them, and that goes for the Aegis and the Nephthys Shadow. And the thing is, these decks can have some success to an extent, because if you look into this JCG's results, there were people who just placed high, and they had Aegis Heaven, they had Nephthys Shadows, but if you look at the larger scope, so for example, instead of looking at the deck that have results, so let me count, it's like the line is 8, so for the first 24 decks, or even let's add even more, for the first 32 decks, we have 2 Nephthys Shadows and 1 Aegis Heaven. And for the contrary, when you count neutral Havens, we have 4 neutral Havens, and for the midrange Shadow, we have something like 5 midrange Shadow. So it clearly shows that the decks can be played and they can have success, but the thing is, the other archetypes are more consistent. So it all goes down to how you prepare with the deck and how good you know the current metagame and extension of your deck. But that's the problem with the card games, that going first and going second, especially in Shadowverse, have some inherited advantages and disadvantages. So this might be really crucial, and the same goes for the deck builds. Because in Smash, or let's say in fighting game, I will just assume any generic fighting game, where you have different characters. Some of them will have, let's say, some of them will have more power level, other will be weaker and such. But obviously, a player who mastered the weaker character is still gonna beat the player who is really new to the game, but he's playing like the character that's considered the strongest one. That's the things you probably experienced when you played the game.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand that. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. So, assuming any fighting game, let's say a veteran is playing a character, like a fighter, with a power level of 5, while the new player who just came out into the game is coming and he's playing a character with power level, let's say 15, so it's 10 more. The veteran is still gonna beat him by the sheer power of his knowledge, advantage, because he knows the game, he knows the moves, he knows how to block, how to attack, and how to do different things. While the new player, even though he is playing stronger champion, and he is playing stronger character, and his attacks and stuff just 2 more, he's still gonna be beat by sheer knowledge.
That is very true.
Okay, so I
That
hope.
is very true.
Okay, so I hope I made this point clear. So the thing is, it doesn't transition to card games too much, because in this game and in most of the card games, there is a little to no room where you can just show your skills, your plays, and such. Obviously, you can play your cards and you can make excellent moves and trades and just think the entire combat and turns, but it will amount to nothing when you play control deck and you draw cards that you cannot cast on your turn, and your opponent will be like, oh, I will play a monster turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, and all of a sudden, even if he is a really bad player, he just played his card on curve. And that's something that's really hard to deal with some decks if you don't draw correctly, and even if you are a way better player, you just cannot beat him. And that's the thing that wouldn't happen in a games where you take other merits into advantage. So, for example, skills, reflexes, and, well, just look at the games like League of Legends, Counter-Strike. The player with better reflexes and knowledge is still gonna beat the player who doesn't have them. And in the card games, weaker player will usually have a chance to beat a more experienced player because that's the way how the card games are balanced. Some of the random effects are present there, but obviously the draw itself, like drawing card every turn, that's the most random thing you have in common in these games. And that's the thing that allows sometimes for you to have a perfect draw or to just brick. So you draw nothing that you can cast and you stay with your hand while your opponent is doing his things. So the other thing is I hope that was clear, like up to now.
Yeah, I understand what you said. I'm just not sure if I agree. Like, I understand what you're trying to say, and you're trying to help me here, but.
Okay, so yeah. If you disagree, just tell it out. So yeah.
Trying to get how do I say this? If what you said about a new player being able to beat a good player just based on RNG and card draw, yes, that happens. But the big difference is that doesn't happen very often. The better player will be able to win much more consistently, even if his deck is a control deck and can brick, for example. But because he's a good player, his deck will be refined to a point where it doesn't brick as much as the new player would. I'm not sure if I agree in terms of the new player will win because he has the better deck. Obviously, there are some decks which are completely unsalvageable, don't get me wrong, but in two situations where the players are both running the same kind of deck, the better player will win a lot more than the worst player.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Like, that's true, because it will happen, but on the long run. Like, if you play 10 games, 20 games, 100 games. The thing is, what I was trying to say, that's the thing that can happen in tournaments. Because in tournaments, most of them are single elimination. So, if you take a deck that can brick, and you will brick once, then you are out. You're out of the tournament, and your chances of winning this, like, fall to zero. You do not have a second chance, unless the tournament is a double elimination, because some of them are double elimination. If we consider ladder, then yeah, on ladder, that's true, that the better player will win a lot more, and the more games they will play against each other, the better player is still gonna shine and is still gonna win. But in tournaments, you are not allowed to brick even once, and that's the problem, and that's the main reason why a lot of people will just choose the decks that do not brick easily and can play their minions on curve, or just have a game plan like Dimension Shift Rune, which can allow them to go out of any situation with the correct draws and spells. So I hope right now it's clear that what I had in mind, and I don't know if you agree right now with me or not.
I understand what you mean, and I agree to a point even, but it really doesn't rub me the right way, in the sense that not bricking is very, very important. I get that. I understand that. You are right in the sense that you need to bring a deck that doesn't brick. But the point, oh fuck, my English is not working today. Oh fuck, what's the word? The implication that a bad player could, for example, win a tournament just because he drew right. Yes, there's a chance, but that chance is so minimal we can just ignore it because it basically doesn't exist. And I don't particularly like basing my life on chances. I like to base on facts and the numbers I can run with. So I understand what you mean by don't bring control decks, or rather bring control decks that are consistent. But it doesn't really help me, if that makes any sense, to what I'm trying to do. In the sense that, yes, it does help me in the sense that control decks are worse, but I'm kind of asking, like, how... Okay, let's say control decks are less consistent. How do I make them more consistent? How do I make them so that I can go into a tournament and not brick, ideally, or be less likely to brick?
Okay, so there are things that obviously you can do, and just coming back to the thing you said at the beginning, that's true. The new player winning a tournament, that's really unlikely, and that's true that the chance is like minimal to zero, like close to zero at all. But the thing is, he doesn't have to win a tournament. All he has to do is win one match, and he eliminates the other player. That's the problem. And as for not bricking, that's the other problem of the game, because most of the card games, like for example the real ones, I took for example Magic the Gathering or any of the like others, or even Gwent, that's really common. these games have changing player. So if you are player number 1, for example, you are player number 1 and you choose you're gonna start your first game. Then in Magic the Gathering on event, it's on the other player to start the other turn. So if you play best of 3 games, then let's say the player number 1 start first, then the second game, the player number 2 start first. Then the third game, probably the other one. So they swap. While in Shadowverse, if you play best of 3, you can be stuck as player number 2 3 times in a row. And until they fix this problem, because this is a problem, and if you ever looked at any Shadow Logs report or any tournament statistic, the player going first, like, always have more win percentage ratio. And that's really a problem, because if you go into tournament, best of 3, and you go second 2 times, and let's even say you were playing mirror matches, then it's nothing you could do about it. It's random. And if they implement a system where the player swap positions, so you start game number 1, then you are going second in the game number 2, then maybe it will help control decks, and maybe it will help make them consistent. At the moment, it's just really hard to balance things out.
Right, okay. I guess that works.
Yeah. The other thing is, as for making decks more consistent, current meta, or at least the upcoming week, is either about playing Sphinx on curve, or doing a really efficient plays. So neutral Haven going second is one of the examples where player going second can still get advantage out of the things. And the best way to get advantage and try to win from position from player number 2 is to have a powerful evolution on the turn 4. The best example was Big Knuckle Bodyguard, but he got nerfed, so he's not an option anymore. But Big Knuckle Bodyguard on the turn 4 was a thing that allowed some decks, and Blood in particular, to just come back into the game. He would just destroy 2 creatures and still have good stats. Same goes for the Priest of the Casual, but Priest of the Casual is not as powerful as the Big Knuckle Bodyguard, but it's still a thing. It's a card that allows you to make 2-for-1 trade. And all of the decks that can make 2-for-1 trade, so you cast 1 card and destroy 2 cards, or if you are able to kill even more with 1 card, then that's perfect. These are the things that are allowing player number 2 to come back into the game. Assuming other card that's not so common in the meta, but Forestcraft, some people will still play Forestcraft. There is this Twin Elf Assault. For 2 mana, you shoot into 2 minions for the amount for damage that equal to amount of neutral cards you have in hand. So if you are going second and your opponent play creature on 1, play creature on 2, then on your second turn you can cast Twin Elf Assault. So you efficiently kill 2 of his things. So of course there are tools, and this card that make efficient trades, and including a lot of them in your deck, are techs that can allow you to take advantage of going second. Obviously, in ideal world, you always want to go first with most of the decks, but that's like the thing that's just messing with your plan. So if you go second, you have to get a backup, and the backup lies in these cards.
Alright. I understand. Sounds good.
So, for example, if we just take the deck, so let's just take a look, I will open it, the Aegis Heaven, the one that was present in the SCGs. This deck ran 3 Priests of the Cudgels, so this is a powerful evolution the turn 4, so it's really good. But also, it had 3 copies of the Snow White and 3 copies of the Heavenly Hunt. So that means on the turn 4 you can either play Priest of the Cudgel, or you can play Snow White, evolve her, then get another attack. So it also can kill 2 of creatures, to some extent if you made some Trace Ilion, but Heavenly Hunt as a 2-4 with a ward is just powerful stat-wise. So for 2 mana, you get more stats than your opponent, and then the opponent playing aggro might have a trouble into overcoming things. And then if we go and look into the list later, Ancient Lion Spirit, that's another card that can kill multiple cards. Judge of Retribution kills while entering the battlefield, then obviously as any creature with the evolution point you can take advantage of it. Dark Jan can also kill a lot of creatures, so that goes here. Time is Decree, clearing your board, but also clearing the entire battlefield of your opponent. So this deck included just a lot of cards that can take multiple cards out of your opponent, and that's probably the reason why it was able to remain successful, but sometimes good matchups are good enough. And as for the other deck, for the Neptis Shadow, that depends, but this deck ran Fall Tempest, so Fall Tempest is also considered some sort of mass removal. We can say it's like mass removal when you amass enough shadows. And the Death's Breath. Death's Breath is summoning 3 creatures. Of course, it's slow, so it's turn 6, so it's nowhere as fast as the other answers, but it's still blocking aggro decks to some extent. Then, obviously, on turn 8, you have Neptis, and there is some RNG involved, but most of the time you should be able to destroy 1 to 2 of your opponent's creature. Well, always 1, because there is Kawi, so unless you draw 3 Kawis in your hand, you're like guaranteed to destroy the 7. But for the random one, there is a Large Corpse.
Alright, sounds good. On Aegis Haven, this is something that I'm actually kind of a little bit confused about. I've seen some version of Aegis Haven, I can't remember if it was an NGE or JCG, which did really well, either came first or second, that basically threw everything that you said just completely out of the window. And instead of running these early game consistent cards, they ran the Sahagwheel package with Bahamut's, with Israfil, and 3 Sahagwheel, obviously, and they didn't use Snow White, they used Unica instead. Obviously this is a lot more greedy than what would probably be a more traditional Aegis Haven deck. How do you really address that? Keep in mind that this thing came first or second, I don't remember.
But do you know when the tournament happened? Because it's really important.
I can check.
Okay.
Was...
This will be awesome.
Was it August? Like late August, early September?
Okay, so if it was late August, then the meta was different. And even if it was early September, the meta that was in the early September and right now, they're different.
I don't remember. It was relatively recent. I can't find the deck now. I saw it earlier.
Okay. So
I'm not entirely sure, but let's assume it was recent. Let's just assume for the sake of argument that it was recent and they did really, really well. How would you address that?
Okay, so let's just assuming it was right now. The thing is, that might be also one of these things where what I was talking about early on. So there is a chance that he just included this package and he just took them by surprise. Because by default, when you see Haven, you don't expect these cards, so you don't play around them too much, and then when the Sahagwheel happens, it's too late. Like turn 7, you don't expect Sahagwheel with something to appear on the board, because, well, what you do expect? You expect Curate, for example, Judge of Retribution, Dark John, Themis Decree. These are the cards that you play around. You don't play around Sahagwheel package versus Haven, because the thing is not so common. So a lot of games might be won just by the surprise factor, and it's fine, because that means the player really took his time to refine the deck, to think about it, and to how to do things. But that's just assuming it was recent, because the thing is, the meta in this card game, like this card game is really interesting, the Shadowverse, because in most of the card games you don't have nerf and buff cycle so often. In this one, it's 1 month. So even if the nerfs are hitting only 1 or 2 cards, it's still gonna have an effect on the other classes. So the tournaments that happens in the first week after the nerfs are still the tournaments that are shaping the meta. The second week they stabilize, and in the third week it's something that you can expect that's gonna be stable until the next nerf and buff cycle. So the meta is still fluid. It's not in solid shape. Well, unless we consider cards that are straightforwardly broken. So Abyss Blood was powerful for entire month and there was nothing to do about it. Like this card was busted. And the same goes for the Ektar. The Midrange Shadow was so good, and it's still really good, because of the consistency. So Ektar was the thing that was keeping the deck tier 1 for like entire time, and same goes for the Catacomb Prince. Like these two cards were really good, so they nerfed one, and people just transitioned to the other, because the deck have a lot of inherited synergies, thanks to the Shadow and Necromancy effects. And right now, you can just see how Midrange Shadow is still relevant. Because even after the nerfs, people just are adding Deathly Tyrants, or they're just adding all the cards that are relevant. But coming back to the Sahagwheel package, that's the thing that a lot of decks just have. So, for example, Neutral Room can also run Sahakel package. That's the neutral package like Sahakel, Israfel, Lucifer, Bahamut, Zeus. These are all of the neutral cards that are really good, and they can be used in any deck, but you really need to have a strong early game to survive. If your early game is weak, or if you don't draw correct cards to survive, then this package is not gonna be relevant at all. That's probably one of the reasons why most common deck that use the Cycle package is the Ramp Dragon, because you have ramp cards, so you can play your threats faster, while in other decks you have to survive. So if you fail to survive until the Cycle comes, then your entire plan is gonna fail.
Right, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a vague idea, but there is like probably no better explanation like why this deck succeeded. And also the other thing is, even if it was a one-time success, it was still a thing that the player was able to do it. But instead of just seeing one-time successes, the better look of the situation of the meta is just to see the decks that are consistently placing high and are making people victorious.
Alright, fair enough. Well, I guess that's me done for my questions. I don't really have anything else.
Okay.
Besides, we've been talking for a while now, so...
Yeah, I mean, that's not a problem, and well, that's one of the things that I send you on Discord, and even without spectating, it's fine, because by just questions and answers, we can talk a lot of, and discuss a lot of aspects that are important to the game and to the setting, so yeah, hope to see. Anyway, I guess if you say that's all for the moment, well, maybe we'll find some questions later on, we can probably go and do some ladder play, so...
We could do that. Alternatively, do you fancy a few games? Because I feel a bit bad just having you there watching me, just behind my back. Sorry, that's the wrong word. I feel bad you just watching there and not doing anything.
I mean, it's fine, but currently I don't know if I even have some decks constructed, so I would have to build them from the scratch, but decks codes are the thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't mind, we can play against each other, but the point is, it's probably better. I mean, we can scream or play against each other, but it's probably better to do it like later on or off stream or whatever, because the thing is, even if you play against each other, it's still not gonna help in anything, because all in all, if I were to explain my plays and such, that would just reveal stuff about my hand, and if I were to correct your plays or such, that would have to include the knowledge of your hand, so it would be just pointless.
Okay, fair enough. I understand that. I guess we can go for a bit of ladder. What deck should I play? What do you want me to play?
Well, it's not what I want you to play, it's rather what deck do you want to play. I mean, maybe there is a deck that you want to play, or a deck that you want to learn, or a deck that you don't feel so confident in playing.
Okay,
so
there is one deck that I bloody suck at. There's one deck, and that is aggro / mid-range blood. I suck at this deck. Like, I am so bad. Like, I can play control, fine. I can play mid-range, fine. The moment you stick me with an aggro deck, I just, like, there's like potatoes in my hands.
Okay.
All my cards become potatoes.
Sure, but is it only with the blood, or it's just aggro decks in particular?
Aggro and decks in general. I just suck. My main problem is trading. I don't know when to trade and when not to trade, because mid-range and control decks is very easy, because, well, I say very easy, it's actually harder, but the problem is, how do I describe? I always find myself pushing for face, and then being given a situation where I might want to trade, and then when I trade, I find myself not having enough damage to go face and kill and take the win.
Okay, sure. So do you have any aggro blood decklist like ready already? So or do you want to find one?
I'm already in a game.
Okay.
With the blood list that I have already. It's I shamelessly ripped it off someone. I think it was one of the rage contestants. This one's a bit more mid-rangey.
Okay, so yeah, after the game ends, then just send me the code so I can see decklist.
Sure. Can you see my game?
Yeah, I can see your hand. right? I mean, I still cannot see the cards that you are choosing for the mulligan phase, so just tell me what would you mulligan.
Oh, you're in for a treat. I win the game in like 20 seconds. Like, best game ever.
Okay,
Mid-range blood is OP.
fair enough.
Are you still catching up?
Like in my screen, it's still like the beginning of the game, so it's first turn. Yeah, whatever.
Is there any way to get rid of this delay?
On Steam, no. Unless you have a Discord screen share, which also have some encrypted delay, then it's not possible.
Do you want me to just stream it over Twitch in future, and then you can, like, I don't know, watch it off through Twitch?
Oh,
Over
well,
Twitch you can have like 2-second delay or something like that.
no, I mean, via Steam, it's not a problem. Because right now, well, I don't need to see entire hand until there is a combat or something phase, and it's still around 1 minute for every turn, so we have a lot of time to take it out and just talk what's happening.
We have a whole minute for our turn, but it's a bit annoying having to wait for, what, 20-30 seconds? For you to get every single turn waiting. Because 20-30 seconds isn't much, but 20-30 seconds every turn adds up.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, it's not like I'm catching up, but the entire game is just behind. So it's not that bad, and it's manageable. So if it's opponent turn, it's probably like the moment where in the opponent turn, like I'm catching up, because then you can just tell me what card did you roll, and I have entire knowledge, like on the entire board. So
okay, I'll send you the list.
Okay, you can just send me a deck code or whatever on Discord.
I will send it to you now.
Okay.
It's the deck code. You got it?
Yeah, I did. Just typing it out. Okay, I see. Yeah, deck is fine. So, like I said, it might be one of these. But the thing I can recommend, and that's a thing that a lot of people were doing with this deck, is to swap Cursebrand vampires for goblins.
The list that I've seen runs goblins. I don't know why people run goblins over Cursebrand. Like, there doesn't seem to be any kind of advantage.
It is.
Why would you run it? What does it have over Cursebrand?
The thing it have over Cursebrand is the fact that, well, when you are in a 10 or less life, then obviously the Cursebrand is 1 mana 2/3. That's fine. But the other thing you don't want to happen is Baphomet getting Cursebrand Vampire. So you basically lower the probability of Baphomet getting a bad card. Because if you can notice, there is expensive card, Caraboss. And below her, Graf Lantern Captain. He's neutral. Angel of the World, he's neutral. So with the Baphomet, if you get Vanya, Urius, or Bloodwolf, these are all of the perfect cards, because Bloodwolf can attack immediately, Vanya with the evolution point is good, and that goes just for the same like for the Urius. Urius just adds up to some pressure. Obviously he's not the perfect target, but if you have goblins instead of vampires, you just add up to drawing Caraboss. And that's the best thing that probably can happen with you. So Baphomet into Caraboss acts like a tutor, so you don't have to rely on drawing her.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense, because I was scratching my head for a long time thinking, why? What? Like, there's nothing that Goblin has, and, like, I understand now. That I was really scratching my head over that. Okay, it makes sense. It's an interesting little interaction there. I really didn't think about it, but now I know. Right, should we go for another one?
Yeah, if you swap the vampires for goblins, then we can go.
Yep, I've swapped for one. Right.
Okay, good.
So, do you want me to just tell you what happens over the game? Or should we just watch it with the delay?
Okay, so it's probably well, I saw it in the beginning, but it was a long time ago. So with a lot of people with which I was doing this session, the best thing that worked out is something like when you just tell me what would you want to do with your cards, or how would you want to trade, and then with every turn I will just tell you is it good, bad, or how we can play the turn, or obviously, because there are some different aspects of the game, and there also comes a knowledge of your opponent deck. So you have to make your plays according to your opponent and such. So this will come out when we play it and talk.
Here's a question: do you want to keep Razor Claw in your opening hand?
That depends.
It's a runecraft, so I'm going to be assuming D-Shift because that's all I play against these days. Do you want to be keeping Razor Claws? I already have a 2-drop. I've got a Baphomet in my hand. Do I want to keep the Razor Claw as well?
Okay, and what's the third card?
Also Baphomet, which I'm putting out.
Okay, so the thing is, with most of the decks right now, like in the current metagame, you don't want to keep, rather you want to play your hand on curve. So with you, when you already have Baphomet, another Baphomet, and Razor Claw, you have 3 cards that cost 2 mana. So you want to get rid of 1 Baphomet, that's for sure, because on the turn 3 you'd rather cast something that costs 3 or cast a card that costs 2 and 1. And because you already have a 2-drop, you can save the Razor Claw. If you didn't have a 2-drop, because 2-drops are the most important creatures right now, if someone misses a 2-drop, then it's really a liability for the entire game. So if you have Baphomet, you can keep Razor Claw and then throw the other Baphomet out and try to find something that fits your curve better. So 1 mana cost or 3 mana cost.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going second.
Yeah, I see.
With my entire hand is fucking 2-drops. Jesus Christ.
I mean, that's fine. And also just considering what was talking about 2-drops. So it was with the Baphomet. Because the Baphomet is 2 and 1, while all of your other 2-drops, excluding Bloodwolf, because Bloodwolf is also other case, because he was Storm. But for the Urius, Venya, these creatures have more stats. So if you have 2 Vanya vampires, then feel free to keep 2 of them, because they are more powerful. While with Baphomet, he can trade with a Goblin, he can trade with the Wise Merman. So he is a unit that would die to any 1-drop. So that's another reason why you don't want him in multiples in your hand. Because if you have 2 different 2-drops with 2 different stats, then you can choose which one is gonna fit the turn better, or which one is gonna add more pressure on your opponent. While if you have 2 of the same way, so 2 Baphomets, they will just die to something that's really common nowadays.
Okay. But it is D-Shift that I'm playing against. Oh, I guess the name of the game is just Rush Face.
Yeah. Like against D-Shift, there is nothing you can do besides applying pressure. That's the only thing you can do for now, and just hope you will be faster.
What?
What happened?
I'm confused about one of his plays. It didn't make much sense.
I see, he made Piercing Rune for 4.
Uh, 4, 6. Yeah. I'm being risky as fuck with my last play. Oh no, I lose! Damn! This is what I mean. I don't know when to trade and when to go balls deep.
Yeah, you could tell me beforehand, like before you played the turn, because right now I see what you did with the Razor Claw and the Blood Wolf, and this turn wasn't good. And the reason is, if you would play a Blood Wolf and the Urius, Levin Duke, then you would simply apply more creatures on the board. The reason is, with the Razor Claw versus Dimension Shift, there is nothing that can stop you from casting the spell. So you can cast it anytime. You can apply this 3 points of damage anytime, while for every creature that you play on the board, it has to survive for at least 1 turn, unless it's a Blood Wolf, to apply some damage to your opponent. So the more you hesitate, like the longer it takes for you to play your creatures on the board, then the so less time you have. With the Razor Claw, once again, you can just cast it anytime. So damage from creatures comes first, while damage from Razor Claw, it can come at the very last of the game. Because then you doesn't care if your opponent killed your creatures already, you don't care about your board at all. You just finish him off with the Razor Claw later on.
My logic was is that I could kill him in... because I had so much damage from hand, I could kill him by turn 5. And yes, that worked, but the problem was is that I wasn't paying attention to the fact that the Razor Claw and the Blood Wolves, they all hurt myself, and I died to late phase at the end. But yeah, this is what I mean by I suck at aggro. I just can't play aggro to save my life. But I am learning, slowly but surely. I will understand aggro.
Yeah, of course. Like, the other thing with the Razor Claw is the fact that you just mentioned, that it hits your face. Obviously, the damage is kinda irrelevant early on, because it's only 2 points of damage, but if you save the spell for the very last, so just to finish your opponent, you can then judge. Because if you didn't cast them early on, then you wouldn't have take so much damage, and then you just wouldn't die. Because assuming you would play another creature, then you wouldn't just cast a Razor Claw to kill yourself. Like, that's not gonna happen. So your ability to cast the spell would be diminished, so you wouldn't cast it, but then you would survive. So maybe you would be win by creatures. I don't know. But spells, like, this is the advantage of the spells in this game. And as for Shadowverse, that's the other thing you have to consider when playing aggro decks with spells. Because some decks, like Neutral Haven, it will have no spells at all. It will just play creatures and amulets still produce creatures. And the thing is, in this game you have no counteraction from your opponent unless something is happening when the creature dies. So the effects like Lurching Corpse or Underworld Watchman carry. So unless cards that have some effects during your opponent's turn happened, then you are free to do what do you want. So that's why the deck like Dimension Shift can exist, because it can cast spells, it can take additional turn, and when the moment to get additional turn appears, your opponent have nothing to stop you. Like, he cannot do anything at all. It's not like in some games where you have counters, where you have answers, like instant answers, where you can disrupt your opponent. You cannot. And the same goes for the board state. When you have creatures and it's your turn, it's up to you to decide how you want to trade. So it's up to you how you wanna go face, how you wanna trade with your opponent creatures. So obviously, coming out of this, more creatures you have, or the bigger creatures you have, it's easier for you to decide how the turn is gonna be, it's easier for you to plan the turn, while with spells, and especially with this kind of spell that deals damage, so Razor Claw, you can do it anytime. There is nothing that can stop you from damaging your opponent's face. He cannot play Ward to prevent it. Like, he cannot play Grimir, cannot play Kawi, and it will be like, oh, I cannot cast it into his face. No, obviously you can. While with creatures, so for example, the Blood Wolf, he can just play a ward creature, and with a ward creature, he can block some damage to his face. So it's a really common thing to save spells for the last, because they are just so flexible. Yeah, I know this was a really long one, but I hope it got through.
Yeah, that's fine. Evo points. Against playing control decks and D-Shift, do you just want to spam Evo points to go face? Or should you keep them?
That's really yes and no answer, because it's not easy to maintain them, and it's not easy to judge when you should use them. The thing is, versus D-Shift, like especially versus D-Shift, if you have the ability to evolve a creature that costs 3 mana or more, like 3 play points or more, it's really good, because if you evolve something that costs 2 play points or less, he can bounce it back with a kaleidoscopic glow, like the very same thing that happened in the game versus Dimension Shift. But if it's a Blood Wolf, and especially, once again, with Blood Wolf, even if he bounces it back, it's still a creature with a storm. So on a Blood Wolf, sometimes it's worth it. Other than that, versus most of the control decks, you just want to use your evolution points accordingly to player number you are. So if you're a player number 1, you just cannot use your evolution just for face, unless you are sure you are gonna win. Because as for player number 1, you only have 2 evolutions. And if you evolve something, your opponent can respond with his evolution point. So, because he got 1 more. So, you just want to save 1 evolution point for really stalemate strategies. While if you are playing from a position of a player number 2, like for example right now, what I'm seeing, you had 3 evolution points and you didn't evolve anything. even though you were just aggressively going to his face. And that means you just lost some damage. Because you have 3 evolution points. You can evolve something on turn 4, turn 5, turn 6. And by the time the turn 6 ends, either your opponent is dead, or you will have a really stalemate situation on the board, and he will come out of it. So it's better to apply pressure early on, and especially as a player number 2, you want to use your 2 evolution points to apply a pressure, and have 1 evolution point as a backup, because you still have evolution point advantage over your opponent.
Okay, I'm getting a little bit confused on turn 6. I have Evo Goblin and Angel of the Word on the board. He's got a Grimnir on the board. I could play a Gruff Mountaineer, kill his Grimnir, and then do 2 damage to face, bring him to 11. Or I could Hungering Horde the Grimnir, keep the mountain, and just Evo go face and bring him down to 8 and turn him into Vengeance. But again, that's 3 more damage to face. Do you think the 3 damage is worth it and accept the risk of Vengeance, or do you think not to go for it? And fast.
Okay, so it's better to not risk unless your opponent have an easy way to bring him down to Vengeance. I mean, I see that right now. So you have to gamble. So if you don't put him into a Vengeance, then he requires additional card to put himself into a Vengeance state. So the better answer is probably to not bring him down to Vengeance, unless you can finish the game on the next 3 turns. You just have to have a backup plan. So what's gonna happen when he does the thing? So if you bring him down to Vengeance, the thing is, he might cast Revelation, while if you leave him at 11, he cannot cast Revelation, so he requires additional card. So that's like gambling against odds. You simply vagger whether you have 2 cards that he can combo out, so one to take him into Vengeance and the other being Revelation, because that's the most common removal. Or the other one, does he have Revelation at all? Because if he doesn't have Revelation at all, there are also other cards in Vengeance that can punish you. So Emeralda, Alucard, these are the cards that can just help him get out of trouble.
Okay. It's going into turn 8. He probably has Revelations. I think I have to commit and pray he doesn't have it. I'm not entirely too sure. He's played a Sabreur on the board. I've got no nice way of getting rid of it. I drew a Night Horde, so that gives you kind of an idea. He's also got a Mask of the Black Death on the board, which really slows me down.
Yeah, Mask is indeed really troublesome, and all in all, it's a bad matchup for you when committing, because Control Blood is just really good in maintaining the board state. So right now, I just want to take down the Mask, and if you feel like you have to take the risk, sometimes it's worth doing it, because it's called play to win. If you play to win, then it's different than playing to not lose. So like 2 different approaches. Playing to not lose is like praying that you will find an answer eventually and then come out unscathed, while playing to win is risking. And then if the risk pay off, you win. If the risk doesn't pay off, then you're gonna lose. But you would lose nonetheless. So sometimes it's just worth committing into the play.
Yeah, I had to commit, and he had Revelations. I've lost.
Yeah, but the other thing is, you said it was going to turn 8, so even if you, for example, didn't commit, then he would still be able to cast it for like full cost.
Yep. Even if he cast it for full cost, I would still lose because I would be so behind on tempo. I would never ever be able to build up the amount of tempo. Really, really hard matchup that. I think play something a little bit different. Nope. Yeah, let's do the mid-range shadow, because mid-range shadow has now changed a little bit. People are running catacombs and a few other things. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, I mean, it varies from version to version, but a lot of them are playing catacombs.
Yeah,
That's true.
I'm not someone who's very fond of catacomb really. I don't really know what he gives. Like, yeah, he gets some sticky minions. Yes, those sticky minions work well with each target go phase. but I find if you just play the matchup well and you gain the board, you don't need Catacomb to get the board. If that makes any sense. He seems a bit to me like a defeatist kind of card where you only win because you've got sticky. What's it called? Sticky skeletons on board. But I've been trying it out, and I'm still not so sure about what really he brings to the table.
Okay, so there are some things that he brings to the table which are important. So, as you said, sometimes skeletons are not enough, and in some cases it will feel like it's irrelevant. But current iterations of Midrange Shadow have a lot of things that can sacrifice other things. So they play triple soul conversion, triple demon eater, and triple necro assassin. That's the core of most of the midrange at the moment. And Catacomb Prince simply puts you ahead with first thing first, skeleton count. So it brings you a creature that you can sacrifice to these cards, so you can take full effect while still not losing any of these good cards. Because while sacrificing a skeleton is not as painful as sacrificing a full value creature, the other thing is it brings a lot of shadows. And currently Ektar requires 8 shadows. It's not like you can summon Ektar like the old one with the 6 shadows and summon 2 zombies. No, right now it's either 8 or 0. It's not like you can summon 1 zombie, which was option in the past. The little Soul Squasher is still there in most of the builds, so it takes 4 shadows out of the deck. And because a lot of lists are applying Deathly Tyrant to their deck list, it's like 20 shadows. So with Catacomb Prince, it simply allows you to fulfill your shadow count and to just play efficiently with it.
Right, okay. So, see, that was a bit that I kind of missed, that the Deathly Tyrant is so expensive. But again, it doesn't rub right with me, because it's a kind of case where you run Deathly Tyrant to win from when you're behind, in the sense that it's kind of hard to describe. How do I describe? Sorry, I'm making a play. I need to think.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, it's basically saying, like, if you run Deathly Tyrant, it's a kind of a case where you become dependent on the Deathly Tyrant to win. You can't just play the normal mid-range, so you become dependent on the Deathly Tyrant, so you have that. You start from behind, if that makes any sense. Because you have you weaken your deck to get a win condition, which it's really hard to explain.
I mean, basically, you're just questioning the importance or the things are that the Deathly Tyrants brings to the deck, outvalues the inheritance of the entire deck. I don't know, like the consistency.
Yeah, no. I'm saying the role that the Deathly Tyrant brings, that he does, seems very, very, how to put it, defeatist to me, in the sense that in this particular deck. Because the whole point, from my understanding, is mid-range is you flood the board, you get control of the board, and then you Demon Lord each target for lethal. And with Deathly Tyrant, it basically is a kind of case where you've lost that, and you haven't done that. You've become dependent on this card to win you the game. That isn't part of what you usually do, right? So what you tried to do failed, so you've become dependent on a card that it's really hard to describe. English is not my first language either. Though I sound British.
No problem. I guess I understand what you're trying to say, but I think I can just let my thoughts about the Deathly Tyrant, and then maybe it will be more clear, or maybe we'll find an answer in it. So the thing with Deathly Tyrant is a lot of decks just play it as a one-off. So there is only one copy in the deck. That means you won't draw it every game, but with a lot of card draw in the deck. So Demon Eater and the Soul Conversion, there is a lot of card draws after all. So you will be able to draw plenty of them. And that means in a lot of games, eventually you will draw the Deathly Tyrant. And the thing is, it's not like another win condition, because it's also really a misused term with win condition. This game have only 3 win conditions as for now, like not considering what we call forfeits. So if you don't concede, well, not can't concede. So you can win by damage, so taking your opponent to 0 or less life. You can win by cards that say that you win the game. So Seraph is the card that can win. Doesn't matter how much your opponent have life, Seraph just says, well, you win the game. And the other one, like this method, is basically non-existent. It's making your opponent to draw from an empty deck. So if his deck ends, if he have no cards left in his deck and he's trying to draw a card, then he will lose. So it's super rare, and I personally saw it like, well, only a couple of times, and it was always on Arena, because, yeah, on Dig 2. So the most common win condition right now is damage. And the Deathly Tyrant is still playing with what your deck is planning to do. So unless you're playing Seraph, the decks in the current metagame will still aim to win by damage. And they can do it by a lot of different angles. So Storm Dragon or just Dragon Ram, for example, it will play a lot of big creatures and try to finish your opponent in 1 and 2 attacks. Midrange decks that will flood, they will try to flood the board, they will try to take control over the game, and that is the deck that the midrange Shadow is. But the Deathly Tyrant simply adds another angle. So there are several angles, let's call them angles, where you can attack your opponent. So you can attack your opponent by spells. If you're playing something like Dimensional Shift or just spell-based Runecraft, you can disrupt his turns and his creatures by spells. Then you can play your finishing creatures and win by damage. With the dragon, you can remove your opponent board by spells and then play your big creatures. With the midrange, most of the time you are forced to use your creatures to apply a pressure on your opponent, and then you can slowly, little by little, take his life total, so attack him. With the Deathly Tyrant, the thing is, you don't always need to use his 20 shadows, but what he adds, if you have them, it's 13 damage. Out of hand. It's 13 damage that he can only prevent by playing a ward, because it happens on your turn, so your opponent cannot prepare for it. So the only thing you would have to do in the game is just deal 7 damage to your opponent. If you do not have 20 shadows, there is still a chance that in this particular game you played Cerberus's before. Cerberus still have a spell that adds +2 to any given creatures. That's why in the aggro version of the midrange Shadow, aggro version of Shadow, they played Phantom Hole. So it adds storm creatures. Storm creatures are really powerful in the game, so even if Deathly Tyrant, even if a single one-off, sometimes will break your hand, there will be games where he is all you need to win the game. Like, he will just bring this another angle, so Storm. That's one of the edges over your opponent, where you can just take advantage out of it. Because midrange Shadow doesn't have too many of the storm creatures. Like Shadow as a class. We have Phantom Hole, we have Mummy for 2 mana that gets Storm at the Necromancy cost. We have this one, so Deathly Tyrant. But commonly, there is no present Storm. So as long as your opponent deals with your board, so for example he kills your bird every turn, you will not deal damage to him, because you do not have sources of direct damage in your deck. And Deathly Tyrant just adds a direct source of damage that you can play out of hand and attack your opponent if he have no ward on the board. So that's why sometimes he will do nothing. He will sit for entire game and it will be a dead card. But there will be a percentage of games where just the addition of this single card will be enough to win you the game. And that's probably the reason why a lot of people just add one of them at the present builds. The other thing is, in commonly used builds, you gain a lot of shadows. So unless you spam Ektar every turn, then you should be able to use Tyrant.
Okay. I think I understand.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably not all about it, but I tried my best at explaining like the reasoning why people put it in the deck. So I hope it helped.
Sense. In terms of my play, do you see anything particularly that you don't agree with, that you don't like, that you think I'm doing wrong?
So right now I'm at turn 5, and so far everything is just going fine. You just play your creatures, destroy your opponent creatures, and what surprises me is like not your place, but your opponent. That he's playing neutral dragon. That's not something that you see nowadays.
Wait, he's playing neutral dragon?
Well, he just played Hector, so
Oh,
and
yeah. Wow, I was not paying attention.
yeah, like the previous turn it was Hector with something, so had to have neutral cards in his hand. I mean, maybe he doesn't have like neutral to the court. Maybe his only neutral cards are the super expensive one, like in every dragon. But the Hector was surely shooting, so.
Ay, ay, ay. I'm gonna do something that you probably don't like, but I think is good. Turn 8, he played Bahamut, and I have 2 skeletons on board. I drew Demon Lord each tar, and instead of... Oh, punished. Fuck. Instead of playing each tar on White King and then using the Bane to get rid of the thingamajiggy, I played... You'll see for yourself, I was basically trying to win the game outright. The only thing that would make me lose was exactly Grimnir, which he had. Which made me very, very sad.
Yeah, I would say so. So, as for the play, so I understand you had the option to remove the Bahamut, and you didn't. That's what happened, right?
Yeah, the idea was that the play was only really weak to 2 cards, and I felt like if he had those cards, he would have played them already. But he kept the Grimnir in hand.
A new thing will follow.
Ay, ay, ay. Lucifer.
Well,
Lucifer.
you knew he had Lucifer in his hand.
I know, I hate Lucifer.
Yeah,
It never goes away.
he's really powerful sometimes. I mean, well, when played correctly. He's a really good one. Okay.
God damn it, okay. I have to trade this. I have to. Okay, he has a Sahakuel on the board. I have an Evo point. Do I pray he doesn't have another 2 damage and just go face, or do I trade the Sahakuel? He has 12 health. And another Lucifer.
Okay,
Pray he doesn't have another
so if we knew that he already have a Lucifer, it's probably better for you to trade if you're able to.
I can trade. It's not a nice trade, but it's a trade.
Yeah.
I'm keeping the Evo point.
Yeah, there is no need for you to use the
Oh
Evo
my
point
God,
right
I'm
now.
a potato. I am a potato. I completely forgot about... I completely forgot about Adil's end of turn effect. Potato, it's so hard.
Oh well, if you did trade like this, then yeah.
I potatoed so hard. Oh God.
Yeah, you could just attack with the Soul Squasher, that would be enough.
Oh, okay, okay. I top decked well.
Did you top deck Hector?
Top deck really well. Just pray no more board clears, and then we'll be fine.
Okay, see zombie party.
God, Dragon heals so much.
Yeah, but it's one of the advantages of the deck. Like, it can play spells and it can play creatures that simply heals your face, and that's enough, because they're just big and expensive. Yeah, Sybil and double kill for 6, I see. That's bad.
God, I'm potatoing so hard at the moment.
Well, you have to remove 2 Sybils.
Yeah, I know. I'm just thinking the best way of going about this. I don't have enough damage without Evo effect. Makes me very sad.
What are you hiding inside?
Yeah, that's true. But it's at least it's good that you had this Evo point. Like without it, it would be too late to do anything. And obviously, it's a really bad moment right now in the game.
Very bad.
And this is one of these situations where if your opponent would remove your entire board with Bahamut or Breath of the Salamander and you would top the Deathly Tyrant, then you would win. Obviously, Zeus is blocking it, so Zeus is preventing any kind of these activities happening, but it's just one of these scenarios where you can just say, like, what's gonna happen if I top deck this and this, while if you do not have this card in your deck, then this possibility, like, it's not possible. So sometimes it will just give you an edge to do some stuff that otherwise you wouldn't be able to, and let's just say the amount of matches where you won't use him or he will be as a dead card and you will just lose the games because you draw him instead of any other card is still gonna be lower than amount of matches that you will be able to win just because you have him in the deck. So I would say the positive effect still outweighs the negatives of him being in the deck, and the more angles you have to attack your opponent, the better for the deck. Like the other reason, because you said you played Seraph a lot. So Seraph main game plan was simply to just, obviously, take down Seraph and win by Seraph. But you also had some cards, like Beast Calaria, and I don't know if you played with the March Heartitarim or any other removals later on, but sometimes even Seraph deck was able to just overcome a board and win by damage. Of course, these instances were really rare, but, well, it happens from time to time. So Seraph efficiently could win by damage or by Seraph. But well, it's really rare for Seraph to win by damage.
I think I've done it once or twice. I've switched over to mid-range, neutral sword to give that a try. See if there's anything glaringly wrong with it as well.
I guess you're looking for a fight.
I've teched Tina in mine. Do you think she's still good as a tech choice? Because I'm seeing a lot of mid-range sword. A lot of mid-range sword and mid-range Haven.
Okay, so I don't know, like, your entire list, so sometimes it's hard to judge if she's good or bad, but because you are playing neutral deck, she already have some synergies, so she doesn't disrupt your deck too much. So I would say she's fine, like, she's just fine to have in the deck, and obviously there will be situations where she will take you and able to win the game, because Tina is one of these cards, like the thing I was talking about early on, where powerful evolution on turn 4 can overturn the game from the player number 2, and she's one of these cards that on the turn 4 with the Evo point when going second can take 2 creatures with her and make efficient trade and still be a relevant body. So she's fine.
Okay. Holy shit, I'm playing against Daria.
Here in this tower, all alone.
It's knowledge I seek.
Yeah, Daria is so uncommon nowadays. It's hard to believe.
Yeah. Daria's been killed.
Focus on your inferno, Tina.
I mean, some people will still play the deck, and it's okay, but more than not, Dimension Shift is just more powerful than Daria.
How interesting.
so that's one of the reasons why it's not so common. Like Daria was super powerful in Rise of Bahamut, but then Tempest of the Gods Wonderland, she wasn't as relevant as she used to be.
Yeah.
Currently, unless he goes with a lot of spell boosts on things, the stuff is looking good for you.
I'm waiting on my opponent.
Oh, okay.
So how are things in Poland?
Well, right now the autumn starts to hit, so it's getting colder, and I mean I'm used to cold anyway. So, other than that, same stuff. Like probably in every country, government is doing their things. People don't like it. Yeah.
It seems like it doesn't matter where you live.
Yeah, there always will be problems.
The government is always doing something wrong.
Hmm.
God damn it. Okay, you managed to get Daria out on turn 5. That's kind of scary.
You're done for.
Yeah. Daria is powerful. And you have no ambush creatures. At least I didn't see you draw any unless you draw on turn 5.
No, I draw into another Shield of Flame. I'm thinking... Tina, get rid of the 5-2, trade into the 2-2, leave the Daria on the board, go face with the Thingamajiggy so that whatever he plays next turn I can kill with either a Lyral Evolve or a Luminous Evolve or a Shield of Flame.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, there is also a way where you can take advantage of the current state and kill entirety of his board, and that's also one of the options, and that's probably what I would recommend right now. So you can evolve Lyrial, trade her into the Daria, then with the Rapunzel you can kill his 2 and 2, with the Shield of Flame you can kill off his Oculus, or whatever this 5-2 thing is called, and then you are left with Rapunzel only on the board, but his board is empty. While if you go with the Tina, then you are still leaving something on his board. So that's risky.
I didn't see that until you said it, and then I ran out of time and I didn't complete the turn. Very sad.
Oh yeah, like I should mention it early on, so we would have enough time. So that's on me. Like that's that's one of these rare chances where animations and evolution are taking too much. So, but the thing is, why this play would be good, because versus Daria and obviously versus decks where you are playing aggro sword, like the aggro sword, neutral sword. These are all of the decks that are really similar. Your ability to come back on a board is really limited. So unless you draw your cards like Council of Card Knights, or draw a lot of cards with the Rabbiter Attendant, if you don't maintain your board, or don't maintain opponent board clear, then your tools to deal damage and clear board are limited. So right now, it's gonna be hard, but well, it's gonna be hard because the previous turn failed, so...
Yep.
Yeah, that's the effect.
Yeah. Kind of painful, but
yeah, I suspect the game is gonna be lost only because of that. But well, it's another thing that people sometimes misunderstand. But I suppose you're not one of them, because you said you played competitive in any games, like other games. So sometimes people will get discouraged after losing, like they will lose one game, they will lose 2 games, and they will be like, okay, this deck sucks, I'm not gonna play this anymore. Or they will be like, okay, I'm afraid of playing ranks. Because I suppose you are not, but there are some people with rank anxiety. They are just afraid to play ranked games because they are afraid they will lose points when they lose. While obviously the truth is, the points, and especially in Shadowverse, points doesn't matter too much, because it's not about if you win or lose the game, it's about if you are able to play perfectly or try to commit as like not as many, but as many good plays as possible, and as low mistakes as possible. That's the thing that
Yeah,
people...
sorry about that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. It's also because, well, there's a delay and I said it really late. But well, coming back to the point, I guess you agree with me that it's on ladder, it's not about win or lose, but about learning and making good plays.
Oh no, I was apologizing because I didn't hear a word you said because I had distractions in real life.
Oh, okay.
My
Yes.
cat is being...
No
so
problem.
I had
So,
to
yeah, I can...
wait for a second so the cat doesn't go kill itself.
No
but
problem.
I
Yeah, I can
got the
repeat
rough
what
gist.
I had in mind. So, what was I saying? That a lot of people have the wrong concept of ladder. They have ranked anxiety. They won't play ladder plays because they will be afraid of losing and they will get discouraged after losing games. But as I said, I suspect you're not one of them because you played competitive in other games. But all in all, it's just important to keep in mind that in the end of the day, it's not about how many points you lost or win on the ladder, but were you able to play a game without mistake, or were you able to play the game with all of the correct plays and such. So, yeah.
Hold on a second, my microphone's being done. There we go. Yeah, I don't have that problem. I've been through that phase already. I've made my peace with myself. I know that I suck already in the game, therefore I can only go up. That is my that's my personal motto. If you know you suck, you don't have any expectations to begin with.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a joke, by the way.
No problem. I get it.
But yeah. So where do you want to go from here?
Well, so, I don't know, like, if you have another questions, like, for now, then just feel free to ask them. We can go play some ladder, or we can just, well, just end this, like, for now. Then you can just get used to the knowledge you have. Like, in the first message when I said that it sometimes takes some hours or some games, like, you have to play some games and try for yourself, like, how the different approaches, different traits are going to be, especially with the stuff I was talking about, the control decks. So right now you might muddle with your Aegis if you still want to play it, or with your Neptis, and maybe try to find cards that will help you get over the second player turn. And the only thing that's left then is playing and testing the deck, like how consistent it is, did it help or not. And if you want to play some off-stream games, then I will be able to, but in about 1 hour or so.
Sorry, could you repeat that again? My headphones are being really dumb. Hold on a sec. Let me...
Okay.
Okay. Can
Okay.
you speak?
Yeah, I can. So,
I can hear you now. You were really muffled to begin with. Say that again.
okay,
Sorry.
no problem. So, from the beginning, I guess. So, what I was saying about what, like, where we can go from. So, right now, all that's left to, like, if you have any other questions, then just feel free to ask them. If not, then I guess right now, playing more aggro won't help too much, because that's not a problem. I mean, all you have to do, because you are stick to playing your Neptis and Aegis, so you can just muddle with them. So, for example, trying to find some cards that will fulfill the roles of being cards that give you advantage when going player number 2, because without playing on ladder and testing it, how it goes, it's gonna be really hard, because theorycraft and the reality, these are two different things. So, obviously, playing some more ladder. And, well, I guess we can save a lot of stuff for the other session, because obviously you have to just comprehend. You can, obviously the session is also recorded, so you can watch it again if you want some informations. And previously we were talking about playing against each other, so I can do it, but in about 1 hour from now.
What time is it? 9:30. Yeah, sure. I can do another... Yeah, I can stick around for another 2 hours and a bit or so. Yeah, sure. One of my main issues is that I don't really have any... Well, it's not that I don't have people to play against, it's just that I don't have many people to play against. So I like to have like lots of different people with different... how do I say? Specialities. 'Cause when I used to play Pokemon, I used to have one person who played one thing, and someone who plays something else, and then with the Smash Brothers, I had more people than I had fingers and point at.
Yeah.
So I say the more people to practice with, the better.
Yeah, that's true. Like, you can just ask person to play a specific archetype or a specific deck or whatever, and then it can help you out. Yeah, that's fine.
Cool, fantastic. So I guess we're done then.
Yeah, I think as for now, yeah, because obviously, like I also said in the first message, sessions longer than 2 hours are not kind of productive. Like, that's the same reason why lessons in school are like 45 minutes. Well, at least in Poland, but in a lot of countries they are like around 1 hour. Because having too many information to comprehend, at times, sometimes they don't get through. So it's better to spread them. That's why for like entire game sessions I was doing something like 2 sessions, like both of them for something like 1.5 to 2 hours. And we already discussed a lot of things. So.
I definitely agree. I know I can't pay more attention than like 10 minutes, let alone 2 hours.
Okay, so
yeah, I guess we'll leave it there.
Yeah, also, I will also send you a link to the book. I really do recommend. So, like I said, even if you already have even if you already have a mindset and such, then it's still a really fine thing to read. Like, it's not something that you have to do now, but it's just good. Like, this thing really compiles all of the info, and because it's based on the fighting games from 10 years ago or even more, 17, like the year 2000, it's really old school. But the examples there are still present, and it can transition to any current game.
Cool. I'll have a look through.
Okay. Yeah, so for now I will just message you on Discord where I can play or not, and then we can also schedule another session.
Sweet.
Yeah.
We'll do that then.
Okay, well, see ya, and have a good night.
Yeah, you too. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, so that would be it for everyone watching on Facebook and Steam, Facebook and Twitch. So thanks for coming too. And obviously, if you follow my channels, then you can find announcements about another lessons and such that will be happening in the future. So, the most common thing is to just follow my Facebook. So if you are watching on fanpage, then you already know where to head. If you're watching on Twitch, then just follow the link provided in the description. And there also will be one tomorrow with the other guy. And if you just want to go and take private lesson, because there are also things that just go to the gamer sensei and order the lesson there. So I have to go do some stuff. So also have a good day. Also thanks for Torturable. No idea how to pronounce this nick. I mean, that's painful. Like, my pronunciation sucks, but that's that's one of my problems. That sometimes I'm really hard to understand what I want to do. Because it donated to me like a huge amount, and really grateful. Yeah. So once again, thanks. Thanks for the donate, and